Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm 27. I live in a damp little flat above a chip shop in Brighton. And I work in a soul-crushing admin. Job that pays. Just enough to afford the good oat milk. Not the best oat milk, just the one that doesn't taste like regret. Anyway, here's the story of how my dad gave my brother $1 million. Quit to start a business and gave me absolutely sod all. But don't worry, Grandpa had opinions. And a will. So let's talk about Oliver, my older brother, the golden child, the chosen one. Not in a Harry Potter way, more like if Harry had failed all his newts and then been given the Ministry of Magic anyway, because he's got potential. Now Oliver has always been the family's emotional support entrepreneur. He once sold fake Yeezys on Depop when he was 17. And suddenly my dad started calling him a visionary. Me, I baked one decent Victoria Sponge in year 9, and somehow that didn't warrant a parade anyway. Fast forward a few years and Oliver, bless him, decides he's going to launch a tech startup. This is the same man who thought HTML was a venereal disease and had to Google how to connect the printer for half an hour before giving up and just emailing me to do it. But sure, next Jeff Bezos apparently. Now here is where things get spicy. Dad, whose love language is money denial and casual misogyny, hands him a check for £1 million. Not a loan, not an investment. A here you go son situation, like we're living in bloody succession. And Dad's Logan Roy minus the empire power or basic grasp on reality. Oliver didn't even flinch, took the check, bought a Tesla, and started wearing a turtleneck like he was born in Silicon Valley and not Watford. Meanwhile, me, I got a hearty pat on the back and a lecture about building resilience, which is rich. Coming from a man who once called the AA because the car made a weird noise that turned out to be a pigeon. I asked gently, like someone begging for crumbs under the royal table, if I could maybe get a bit of help paying off my student loan. Dad said, Sophie, you need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I've been standing, thanks. Mostly on trains commuting to a job that pays in trauma and meal deals. What really killed me though, the smugness Oliver walks around like his LinkedIn bio is tattooed across his forehead. Founder, CEO, visionary, serial innovator, mate you. Designed a logo on Canva and called it a brand. The best part, the startup didn't even have a name, just the idea. He called it the idea, like it was some mythical beast had plucked from the heavens while meditating in a Uniqlo changing room 6 months, and the only thing the idea had produced was a merch drop no one asked for in a team building trip to Ibiza. Sit, no pitch, no profit, but hey, did post a video of himself standing on a rooftop with dramatic music and the caption, building something big, watch this space. I did. Nothing happened. Meanwhile, I'm out here rationing toilet roll and convincing myself that black coffee counts as a personality trait, but it's fine, it's all fine, because apparently being a woman in this family means your success has to be humble, quiet, and preferably unpaid. So when people ask, are you close with your brother, I just smile and say, oh yes, about 999,870 pounds away. And every time I see that Tesla parked outside my parents' house, I fantasize about keying the word accountability into the bonnet. But I want, because I'm mature, and also Mom said she'd stop inviting me to Sunday roast if I did. Now while Oliver was out here collecting Daddy's checks like they were becoming cards, I, silly me, thought maybe, just maybe I could get a bit of help too. Not £1 million, not even 1,000. Just a small nudge towards my student loan. You know, the one I acquired in pursuit of an actual degree from an actual university where I actually studied things that exist outside PowerPoint templates. So I asked once. I approached it like a hostage negotiation, calm, polite, not too needy British. I said, Dad, do you think you could maybe help with my loan payments? And he, without missing a beat, without even looking up from whatever article he was reading about why young people can't afford homes, spoiler, it's apparently avocado, hits me with, Sophie, you need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Right. From the man who once screamed down the phone to the bank because his contact list didn't work at Pret. The same man who thinks 2-factor authentication is a personal attack. But sure, let's talk about my independence. This coming from someone who funded Oliver's 3rd failed business, not the 1st. Not the 2nd, the 3rd. And what was that particular disaster called? Crypto, but for dogs. I wish I was joking. Apparently it was an app where you could invest in coins that grow with your dog's age. No one knew what that meant, least of all Oliver. The pitch deck literally said revolutionizing pet finance. Like, that's a thing. Like, dogs are sitting there thinking I really must diversify my portfolio. It tanked in 3 weeks. All the money vanished into thin air. Or possibly into a suspiciously timed lad's trip to Barcelona. And Dad still looked at him like he was curing bloody cancer. Meanwhile, I'm eating instant noodles and cutting my own fringe because my bank account has commitment issues. But it's fine, apparently I'm building character. Because poverty is character building, don't you know? Who needs therapy when you've got trauma, right? Sometimes I imagine what it would feel like to be the favorite. To have someone look at me and say you deserve ease. But no, my role in the family is more background extra with a side of emotional labor. So yeah, Oliver got seed money. I got seeds, literal ones, from Mom to grow my own herbs and save money. And I did. I grew basil. It died. Just like my hope. The woman, the myth. The passive-aggressive silence wrapped in an M&S cardigan. To her credit, she tried to stay neutral, which is a very polite way of saying she avoided confrontation like it was dairy, and she was violently lactose intolerant. She operated on the sacred maternal principle of, if I pretend it's not happening, perhaps it'll unhappen itself. In our house, that meant that while Oliver was playing Monopoly with real money and Dad's blind trust, I was quietly disintegrating into a puddle of resentment and microwave meals. And Mom was stress baking scones and pretending it was all just a phase. Her official position on everything? Well, it's best not to get involved, isn't it? Which is a philosophy that works for parking disputes and WhatsApp group drama. But maybe not when your daughter is crying into her payslip, while your son invests in NFTs shaped like poodles. And then came the advice. Oh, the advice. Delivered, of course, with a sympathetic head tilt and that overly calm voice moms use when they're about to say something that will emotionally derail you for 6 years. She looks at me one day as I'm visibly spiraling, surrounded by student debt, disappointment, and a singular off-brand pot noodle, and says, "Just focus on your own journey, love." Right, my journey. Which one? The one that starts with me being born into a family that treats me like an unpaid intern? Or the one where I get to watch my brother fail upwards in a cashmere jumper while I build character? In a freezing flat with no central heating? Thanks, Mom. I'll make sure to pop that on my CV. Skills, Microsoft Excel, crying without smudging eyeliner, and focusing on my own journey, while everyone else is on a fully funded gap year to success. And don't get me wrong, I love her. I do. She's just conflict avoidant in the same way that the Queen avoids Aldi. I once asked her if she thought Oliver was being treated a bit, I don't know, royally maybe? She blinked, gave me a homemade shortbread, and said, "He's under a lot of pressure, darling." Right. The poor lamb. Must be exhausting. Failing at businesses from the comfort of a fully paid for flat with mood lighting and meal delivery subscriptions. Meanwhile, I'm out here reheating pasta and budgeting like it's the Blitz. Honestly, I sometimes think Mom would have made an excellent United Nations diplomat, except she'd spend most of her time offering tea while world leaders launched missiles behind her. Her whole approach was stay pleasant, stay neutral, and whatever happens, never, ever pick a side, unless it's the side that's shouting loudest and buying her a new toaster. Then maybe, quietly, but only if no one asks. So yeah, Mom was Switzerland, but with a perm, a recipe for lemon drizzle cake, and the emotional presence of a scented candle. And me? I learned to stop expecting backup, because in our family, silence wasn't just golden, it was the whole bloody currency. Now, while I was out here Googling meals you can make with 3 eggs and despair, Oliver was busy evolving. That's the word he used. I'm evolving, Soph. Translation: he bought a Tesla. Not for environmental reasons. Obviously, the man once tried to recycle a pizza box with the slice still in it. But for something much more important. Brand presence. Yes, brand presence. The phrase that tells you someone has absolutely no idea what they're doing, but they're doing it loudly in black roll necks, and with a suspiciously large PR budget. I remember the day it arrived. He stood next to it like he'd given birth to the thing himself. Hand on the bonnet, smug expression set to full power, saying things like, "This car? It represents the future." Of what, Oliver? Poor financial choices? Because from where I'm standing, the future looks suspiciously like a midlife crisis that arrived 15 years early and fully electric. He said it was for networking optics. I said it was for making your ex cry. We both made good points. Anyway, the car was meant to signal legitimacy. Because nothing screams business credibility like spending £80,000 on a vehicle when your startup hasn't even launched a product. Or, a business. And what had he actually achieved by that point? Let's see. An Instagram page with 3 posts and 2 followers. One of them was Mum. A logo that looked like it belonged on a reusable water. Bottles sold at Urban Outfitters for £27. And a team consisting of one guy he met at a rave who does UX. And a girl called Tasha, who never answered emails but looked amazing in the pitch deck. He also hired a brand strategist. Because apparently that's a thing now, who charged him £2,000 to tell him his startup name wasn't Vibe enough. The name? Zenith. Not Zenith. Not Zen. Zenith with an H. Because the domain was available. As if that's ever been a sign from the universe and not a giant digital red flag. The tagline? Elevate, disrupt, become. Become what exactly? Bankrupt? Meanwhile, I'm sitting in my tiny flat with wallpaper that's older than me, wondering how the same bloodline produced me. A fully functioning adult with tax returns and laundry tabs, and this man, who thinks an espresso machine in the office counts as innovation. To be fair, I should have seen it coming. This is the same person who once said, "Why would I get a job when I could just start a company and be the boss?" Which is rich coming from someone who had to call Mum to ask how to boil pasta. But hey, he had the car, the logo, the vibe. That's all that matters, apparently. Substance? Strategy? A business plan that doesn't sound like it was generated by a malfunctioning AI. Too mainstream. Oliver doesn't do basic. Oliver disrupts. He also crashes, burns, and pivots. But that bit comes later. So Grandpa died. Which, was sad, obviously. But also not entirely uneventful if you get my drift. Now, let's be clear, Grandpa wasn't the kind of grandfather you see in John Lewis Christmas adverts. No knitted jumpers, no bedtime stories. And the only time he hugged me, he sort of hovered like the idea of affection personally offended him. This is the man who once told me I made tea, like someone who'd never respected a kettle in her life, and described my handwriting as concerningly demonic. Thanks, Granddad. Love you too. But for all his terrifying bluntness and war veteran energy, Grandpa was sharp. Old school, no nonsense. The kind of man who wore a watch even after retirement and still ironed his socks. He respected 3 things: punctuality, whiskey, and people who didn't talk rubbish. So naturally, he and Oliver didn't exactly vibe. Grandpa used to call Oliver's startup his little internet hustle, and once referred to a vision board as a poor man's to-do list designed by delusion. Honestly, I nearly choked on my tea. The properly made one. Anyway, when he passed, we weren't expecting much. A watch, maybe. A few old war medals. Possibly that terrifying pipe he used to chew like it owed him rent. I didn't exactly think I'd be leaving the solicitor's office with anything more than mild emotional damage and a commemorative leaflet about grieving. But oh no, we were wrong. Deliciously, chaotically wrong. Because what came next wasn't just a will reading. It was a slow-motion inheritance mic drop. The kind of family drama that makes people whisper, "Don't cause a scene." As someone absolutely 100% causes a scene. And let me tell you, when the solicitor opened that leather folder, cleared his throat, and started reading Grandpa's final words, it was not peace. It was not closure. It was war with paperwork. So there we were, sat in the solicitor's office, all in our finest black and fakest grief. Oliver naturally was already posturing like the crown prince of inheritance. He'd come dressed in that ridiculous "I'm a CEO, smart casual" ensemble, blazer, no tie, shirt unbuttoned just enough to look like he'd read one GQ article in 2017 and never looked back. He was lounging in his chair like he owned the building, legs crossed, smug enough to curdle cream. I swear I saw him mentally browsing Tesla accessories, or maybe visualizing his next purchase, a crypto-infused designer, beanbag that tracks your posture, or some other nonsense. And then the solicitor clears his throat. You know when someone coughs with intention? The kind that says, "Brace yourself, chaos is imminent"? Yeah, it was that cough. He opens the folder, adjusts his glasses like he's about to drop spoilers for the final season of Our Family, and goes, "To my grandson Oliver." Oliver actually leaned forward. I swear, you could smell the entitlement wafting off. Him like overpriced. Cologne and unearned confidence. I leave my beloved lawnmower. And I snorted. Not a polite little puff of breath. No, a full feral, unfiltered laugh-snort hybrid that echoed off the solicitor's very expensive bookshelf. May you finally learn to do something useful, the solicitor added, reading directly from the will, like it was Shakespeare and we were in year 10 English again. You could have heard a pin drop. Aunt Cheryl clutched her pearls. Mom looked like she was about to dissolve into a Victoria sponge out of second-hand Shane. Oliver, for the record, did not laugh. He blinked, like someone had just slapped him in the face with a wet cod and then billed him for it. It was glorious. Transcendent, even. Because let's be honest, Grandpa might not have been emotionally available or vaguely cuddly or even remotely gentle. But what he lacked in warmth, he made up for in savagery. And leaving Oliver, the chosen one, the walking LinkedIn post, the CEO of Zenth or Zonk or whatever the hell it was that week, a lawnmower? That was Shakespearean levels of petty. That was art. And not just any lawnmower. His beloved lawnmower. The one he oiled by hand and glared at Dad for, borrowing in 2009. That lawnmower was sacred, untouchable, a symbol of control, discipline, and probably mild generational trauma. So yes, I laughed, loudly, in front of God, and Aunt Cheryl, and Oliver's rapidly crumbling ego. It was the sound of generational justice echoing off mahogany. The solicitor didn't even flinch. Just flicked to the next page like this was all perfectly normal. Which in Our Family? It kind of was. Anyway, that was just Oliver's bit. You want to know what happened when they got to mine? Oh, darling. That's when things got truly cinematic. And then, it happened. The solicitor turned the page slowly, theatrically, like he knew he was about to drop a bombshell, and wanted to savor the moment. Oliver was still processing the emotional trauma of being gifted a literal lawnmower and a metaphorical slap to the face. Mom was blinking rapidly like she'd just witnessed a public mugging. Dad was pretending to read the wall art. And me? Well, I was just sitting there, trying to figure out how to breathe through a laugh, without sounding like I was choking on justice. Then came the words that changed my life. To my granddaughter, Sophie. Everyone looked at me, like I just walked into the room naked holding a chainsaw. I leave the remainder of my estate. Cue the stunned silence of a family who just realized their main character arc has been canceled. Mid-season with no spin-off. But wait, it gets better. This includes my house, my savings, my car, and all personal possessions because Sophie showed up. Because Sophie showed up. That was it. That was the reason. No dramatic speech. No cryptic poem. No secret letter tucked inside a dusty book. Just 5 simple words that summed up everything. Apparently, all those Sunday visits, the ones where I'd pop round with a pack of hobnobs and a lukewarm takeaway coffee, make him tea the proper way, i.e. with respect, and listen to him rant about the NHS teenagers and the death of the British roast, they mattered. Who knew? All that time I thought I was just being the default emotional support granddaughter. Turns out I was accidentally earning an estate. I mean, this is a man who didn't believe in Wi-Fi, therapy, or talking about feelings. But still somehow, managed to leave behind the most heartfelt mic drop in family history. The house? A 3-bedroom cottage with questionable wallpaper, creaky floorboards, and a ghostly smell of pipe smoke and imperial mints. The car? A vintage Rover? That stalls if you breathe near it wrong, but still somehow has more character than Oliver's entire startup. The savings? Not enough to buy a yacht, but definitely enough to cancel my anxiety-inducing tenancy agreement and maybe, just maybe, pay off that bloody student loan Dad refused to help with. And the best part, watching Oliver try to look gracious while his internal organs rearranged themselves out of rage. He smiled like a man passing a kidney stone, sighed good for you in a tone that screamed, I'm dying inside. Mom gasped, then muttered something about how Grandpa always had a soft spot for me, like I hadn't spent the last decade being treated like a co-track. With emotional intelligence, Dad looked like he'd just been left out of the will by proxy, which, honestly, he kind of was. And me? I sat there, sipping lukewarm solicitor's office water, thinking, well, that escalated beautifully. Right. So after the solicitor read out Grandpa's will I was legally handed a house, a car, a savings account, and a surprisingly detailed record collection. You'd think Oliver would accept his fate with grace and maturity. You'd think wrong, because what followed wasn't grief. It wasn't reflection. It wasn't even quiet confusion. It was a tantrum. An honest-to-God, full-throttle, high-octane, CO-of-tantrum-LTD performance. Oliver stood up, dramatically of course, because subtlety has never been his strong suit, and announced, in front of the entire room, this is completely unfair. Unfair, said the man who's been handed checks, cars, opportunities, and Dad's blind affection since 2002. Said the man who once got a networking trip to Ibiza, paid for with family money, and came back with a sunburn and a new tattoo that said, grind mode. But no, please do go on. Then came the accusations. She manipulated him. Right, me. I manipulated Grandpa. With what? My level tea-making skills and ability? To sit quietly while he ranted about the price of stamps. Apparently, all those Sunday visits, the ones no one else bothered to make because they were too busy, or hungover, or still working on the Zenth brand launch, were part of some master plan. Yes, clearly. I'd spent years secretly executing a high-level inheritance scheme involving digestive biscuits, and listening attentively while he recounted the battle of something or other. What a devious little mastermind I am. He even said, and I quote, she knew what she was doing. May I barely know what I'm doing now, and I've already inherited the estate. Let's also not forget, this is the same man who once cried actual tears because Amazon Prime glitched during an episode of Succession. He called customer service and said, I'm emotionally invested, like he was filing for divorce from HBO. But yes, Oliver, please tell us more about how I'm the emotionally unstable one. Meanwhile, Aunt Cheryl was dabbing her eyes like she was in a BBC period drama. Mom tried to say something soothing like, let's all just be grateful for what we have, which was a bold choice considering only one of us had just inherited literally everything. And Dad, well, Dad looked like someone had just told him the family name would now be hyphenated with betrayal. The solicitor, bless him, just sat there blinking, probably regretting every life choice that led him to this exact moment. But me? I stayed quiet, calm, smiled, sipped my solicitor's office water like it was Prosecco. Because you know what's better than revenge? Being right. In writing, signed, witnessed, and legally binding. It was 3 days after the will reading. The dust hadn't even settled. Oliver was still in full martyr mode. Mom had made peace via banana bread, and Aunt Cheryl had probably joined a prayer circle. Then, Dad rang. Not to say congrats. Not to say, well done, Sophie. Turns out loyalty and emotional labor do count after all. Oh no. He rang to have a word. Because nothing good in British history has ever followed those 4 words. And this was no exception. He cleared his throat in that very specific I'm about to say something I know is ridiculous, but I'm going to pretend it's reasonable tone. And he goes, maybe you could redistribute things a bit. Redistribute. Like I was casually holding a communist revolution in Grandpa's sitting room. Like the house and the money were party favors. I could just toss around to keep the peace. Sorry, Dad, were you under the impression this was Monopoly and I'm just hoarding hotels out of spite? And let's not pretend he meant share a few bits. What he meant was, give Oliver stuff. So he'll stop pouting like a slapped toddler with a gluten allergy. He said, and I quote, "It's just your brother's having a rough time. And this has all been a bit of a blow." Oh, poor Oliver. A blow. Because nothing says tragic hardship like still having a £1 million investment history, a smartwatch collection, and a designer dog called Pixel who has more followers than I do. Meanwhile, I've spent the last 5 years dodging overdraft fees and crying in Sainsbury's meal deal aisles. Dad kept going, talking about family unity and doing the right thing, which is hilarious coming from the same man who once bought Oliver a car for getting a C in business studies but told me learning to drive was an unnecessary expense. Anyway, I did what any mature, emotionally grounded adult would do. I told him, I'll think about it. Then I hung up, opened my laptop, and ordered sushi. The expensive kind. With Grandpa's money. I got the salmon sashimi, the avocado rolls, and the gyoza because if you're going to be accused of tearing the family apart, you might as well be well fed while you do it. And as I sat there, chopsticks in hand, drumsticks in hand, soy sauce dangerously close to my tax documents, I thought, maybe this is what justice tastes like. Salty, slightly overpriced, and absolutely worth every bite. Well, I moved out of the chip shop flat. You know the one smelled like fryer grease and existential dread? Gone. Now I live in the Cotswolds, in a house with wallpaper so aggressively floral it could trigger hay fever. There's an actual garden, with hedges, and birds, and the kind of eerie countryside silence that makes you suspect the village is harboring secrets. Oliver's business, that great visionary empire of overpriced branding and vague buzzwords, collapsed. Not dramatically either. Not in a blaze of scandal or embezzlement or a rogue tweet. No, it fizzled out quietly, like a sad sparkler in the rain. Apparently, the market for AI-enhanced mindfulness cubes wasn't quite as disruptive as he'd hoped. He's gone back to consulting, which, as far as I can tell, means tweeting motivational quotes and pretending to have meetings in coffee shops with Wi-Fi and regret. Dad? Still sulking. Still deeply wounded by the fact that his golden boy got a lawnmower and I got a legacy. He calls it unbalanced. I call it math's finally working in my favor. Mom sends vague texts. Things like family is everything or it's never too late to build bridges. Darling, you all burned the bridge. Paved over it with denial and then tried to charge me toll fare. I keep it polite. Mostly thumbs up emojis and the occasional hope you're well. Very British. Very emotionally distant. Very safe. And me? I make my tea how I like it. 2 sugars. Splash of oat milk. Strong enough to put hair on your nan's chest. No comments. No critiques. No unsolicited monologues about cattle temperatures. I read books. I paint a bit. Sometimes I wander around the garden in a dressing gown just to unsettle the neighbors. And yes, I mow the lawn. With Grandpa's lawnmower. Every time I yank that starter cord, I do it with ceremony. Like I'm summoning the spirit of petty justice from beyond the grave. And once the engine's going, loud, steady, reliable, I thank Grandpa. Loudly. Clearly. Just in case the neighbors are listening through their net curtain. With judgment and mild curiosity. Because sometimes revenge isn't flashy. It doesn't come with fireworks or tearful confessions or a last-minute dramatic reconciliation at a family BBQ. Sometimes, justice arrives via solicitor's letter and smells like cut grass, old tobacco, and sweet, sweet victory.